Hi everyone, this presentation goes over Chapter 13 on qualitative studies in the third edition of Jacobsen's textbook, Introduction to Health Research Methods, a Practical Guide. In this chapter, you will learn that a qualitative study looks for the meanings, themes, and theories that emerge from observing and interacting with study participants. Here is an outline of the chapter. Section 13.1 is an overview. Section 13.2 goes over ontology, epistemology, and axiology. Section 13.3 goes over theoretical paradigms. Section 13.4 covers qualitative methodologies, and Section 13.5 covers mixed methods research. Section 13.1 covers an overview. So this chapter has a lot of different definitions, and it goes over a different type of research design than is used in the other designs that are covered in this textbook. So the first definitions are quantitative versus qualitative research. Quantitative research uses structured, hypothesis-driven approaches to gather data that can be statistically analyzed. So a good way that I like to remember the difference between quantitative and qualitative is when you think about numbers, and there's an N in quantitative research, then it's related to quantitative. These are data-driven, number-related research concepts. Whereas qualitative research uses in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, participant observation, and other unstructured or semi-structured methods to explore things like attitudes and perceptions, identify themes and patterns, and formulate new theories. So here I like to think language or words, and there's an L in qualitative research. And so if you think numbers for quantitative and language for qualitative, then you should be able to keep them straight. Qualitative research seeks to answer questions like why and how that numbers-focused quantitative research cannot adequately answer. So figure 1311 goes over some different comparisons between qualitative and quantitative research approaches. So for example, in our first row, the main types of questions answered in quantitative research are the who, the where, the when, and the what, versus qualitative are the why and the how. And you can go over the rest of these rows for the other characteristics on your own time. Then section 13.1 also defines a phenomenon. This is a central concept being studied using a qualitative research project. Some of the aims of qualitative studies are to improve health promotion programs and clinical processes, provide a foundation for social change, understand how people experience health and illness as individuals and members of communities, understand why people do or do not engage in various health-related behaviors, and understand how people make health-related decisions. Now, section 13.2 delves a little bit deeper into ontology, epistemology, and axiology. Because qualitative research examines thoughts and beliefs that cannot be directly measured, researchers using qualitative methods must be aware of the ways their own thoughts, experiences, biases, and assumptions shape the design and interpretation of their research studies. So the philosophical orientations that guide both designs are rooted in these concepts. So part 1. Ontology is the study of the nature of reality and truth. Ontological perspectives extend from realism to relativism. So what is realism? This assumes that one reality exists and it can be understood. What is objectivity? These are facts that can be evaluated without bias. Quantitative research studies seek to make objective determinations about the world. Now, relativism, this assumes that there are multiple realities and they cannot be fully understood. Jacobsen also includes the definition for subjectivity, meaning claims and experiences that are interpreted based on an evaluator's beliefs, perceptions, and feelings. Qualitative research designs typically seek to understand subjective aspects of human existence. So where quantitative studies look for objective aspects of human existence, the qualitative studies look at subjective aspects. So what is epistemology? It is the study of knowledge. Ontology explains how a researcher defines reality and truth. Epistemology explains how a researcher knows what is real and true. So for example, a guiding principle for quantitative studies is empiricism, the assumption that the senses, such as seeing, hearing, and touching, are the best way to measure truth about the world. And so when thinking about these concepts related to quantitative and qualitative research, we see that quantitative research assumes that researchers are independent from their study participants and that researchers can control for possible biases in order to make objective measurements. On the flip side, qualitative research assumes that researchers and study participants are interdependent and they create knowledge together and may interactively explore subjective topics. So what is axiology? Jacobsen defines axiology or value theory as the study of values. Quantitative researchers usually apply an axiological perspective that assumes that rigorous procedures can eliminate the impact of values or biases on a study. Whereas qualitative researchers assume that a researcher's values actually affect the study. And so figure 13.2 goes over these concepts and related to what is reality, what is knowledge, and what are the values, and the differences within quantitative and qualitative studies. Here you can go through on your own time. So 13.3 goes over theoretical paradigms. Because the goal of qualitative research is to understand a complex phenomenon rather than predict an event, qualitative researchers select theoretical perspectives that will guide their study design, data analysis, and interpretation. 4 of the most prominent philosophical assumptions applied to health science research include positivism, constructivism, interpretivism, critical theory, and pragmatism. And figure 13.3 goes over the differences in each of these theoretical paradigms for you. So what is positivism? This is a paradigm in which researchers apply a realistic perspective that assumes that the reality is knowledgeable and that inquiry should be logical and value-free. The word positive denotes definitiveness and certainty. So studies based on a positivist paradigm generally use empirical methods to test hypotheses and predict outcomes. They often employ qualitative experimental designs. But then we also have post-positivism. This is a concept in which researchers aim to experimentally test theories about how the world works, but acknowledge that the unpredictability of human behavior limits the validity of some empirical methods. Post-positivism applies a critical realist perspective to research. So studies that use a post-positivism paradigm often imply quasi-experimental and mixed methods designs. So Jacobsen also goes through the definitions for constructivism and interpretivism. Constructivism is a paradigm in which researchers have a relativist perspective that considers each individual's reality to be a function of that person's lived experiences. Interpretivism is a paradigm in which researchers consider the reality in the social world to be different from the reality in the natural world. Interpretivism and constructivism are about understanding how various groups of people interpret their reality. So studies based on these concepts typically use qualitative study designs. However, the ontological assumption of constructivism is that There are many realities, and realities are created as researchers and participants interact with one another. So other assumptions are that researchers and participants must work together to understand reality, and that beliefs and values are social constructs. These philosophical stances make constructivism the opposite of positivism. So what is critical theory? Critical theory is a paradigm that considers reality to be dependent on social and historical constructs and assumes that reality can be uncovered by identifying and challenging power structures. The philosophical assumption of critical theory is that participants can actively construct realities that are shaped by values and beliefs. So research constructed under a critical theory framework is change-oriented. So think about some of the different theories that we have learned, like the stages of change in the theoretical model. Studies based on critical theory often use participatory methods that empower participants and equip them to advocate for change. So what is action research? Action research is when participants work together to solve a social problem. A transformative paradigm is action research that assumes reality can be changed when researchers collaborate with participants from marginalized populations to address a social justice issue. Pragmatism is a paradigm in which researchers assume that reality is situational and it is acceptable to use any and all research tools and frameworks to try and understand a particular problem and how you may solve it. So the goal of pragmatic research is to solve problems. The focus is on the outcomes of the research project rather than theories and processes that guide it. An assumption of pragmatism is symbolic realism, which treats individuals' realities as being real to those individuals because that orientation is the most useful and practical. Another assumption is that reality can be known and understood using many different approaches. Finally, another assumption is that the beliefs and values are part of practical decisions, so pragmatists often use mixed methods in their study designs. So next we have pluralism. Pluralism occurs when a researcher draws on more than one theoretical framework to guide the design, analysis, and interpretation of a research project. This is very commonly used. Researchers use two or more theoretical perspectives, must carefully explain why the theories are selected, how they were implemented, and how the use of multiple theories informed the insights gained from the study. So section 13.4 goes over qualitative methodologies. Methodologies selected for qualitative research must align with the goals of the study and the selected theoretical paradigm. When planning for a qualitative study, you should often identify the underlying ontology and epistemology to the selection of a suitable paradigm and then the identification of a theoretical framework. So some of the most popular qualitative methodologies are phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, and case studies. And here in figure 13.4, it goes over the qualitative research planning process. Figure 13.5 gives some different examples of the qualitative methodologies used. And so, for example, in phenomenology, the goal may be to understand how individuals gain meaning from lived experiences, and the method for data collection may be in-depth interviews. You can go through the rest on your own time. So what is phenomenology? Phenomenology seeks to understand how individuals interpret and find meaning in their own unique life experiences and feelings. In-depth interviews are used to gather data from several people, and then transcripts are taken during those interviews and examined so the meanings and themes can be identified and understood from the perspective of the participants. In phenomenology, a process called bracketing is often used, and this is when researchers intentionally set aside any preconceived ideas about reality in order to be open to new meanings that might be expressed by participants. Grounded theory is a process of inductive reasoning. It uses observations to develop general theories that explain human behavior or other phenomena. Data collection and data analysis occur simultaneously, so that theories can be developed and refined. In grounded theory, theoretical sampling is often used, and this is an emergent theory to guide the selection of new data sources, with data collection continuing until data saturation has been reached. Ethnography is a systematic study of people and cultures in their natural environments. Anthropological approaches are used to develop this perspective of how members of a particular social cultural group can understand their world. So this tries to give them an insider view rather than an outsider view. Ethnographers often use participant observation methods to understand a group's collective experiences, values, beliefs, and behaviors. And finally, we have a case study approach. This approach uses multiple data sources to examine one person, group, event, or other situation in detail. So this may be used when preparing a case report or a case series, or it may be applied to understanding an event, process, or program. The goal, however, is not to develop generalizable knowledge, but understand one event well. Multiple data sources may be used as part of a holistic examination of the case, including observations, interviews, and reviews of historical documents. So section 13.5 goes over mixed methods research. What is mixed methods research? This is the use of quantitative and qualitative methods in one research study. Some mixed methods projects use a parallel design to collect both quantitative and qualitative data concurrently, and then they compare and interpret the results. However, other times they may collect the data sequentially, completing one type of study first and then designing and implementing the other type of design. Some qualitative studies are embedded within a quantitative study, so it really depends on the goal of the research study. Social science research can often be classified as exploratory, descriptive, or explanatory. Exploratory studies aim to discover new knowledge and develop hypotheses. Descriptive studies seek to understand key characteristics of a group, and explanatory studies test hypotheses about causal relationships. In an exploratory study, qualitative data are collected first, and then you use the insights from that study to design and implement a quantitative study. In an explanatory study, quantitative data are collected first, and then you use the qualitative study to assist with the interpretation of the results. Integration of two strands of a mixed method study may occur at various times during a research project. So sometimes the research protocol does not consider the interface of qualitative and quantitative results until the very end of the project when the findings are being interpreted. However, other protocols may weave both strands in the study together in order to improve or learn through the data collection, data analysis, and interpretation. Okay, so that is it on Chapter 13. Thank you for listening.